Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Welcome to another edition of the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program Teacher Certification Course. If you're joining us online or if you're here at the headquarters, you can please be seated. We're going to be picking up tonight on page 211 of the self-control book. We're going to be continuing in the chapter of self-control in the environment. David wasn't able to make it tonight, but hopefully we'll see him here on Wednesday evening. We're going to be continuing on where Catan left off in the last class. On the saga continues regarding the genetic modification of genetic engineering of our food supply. But before we do that, of course, I want to remind people that are watching, if you want to follow us in the book, feel free to go up to the top of the page on the Facebook page. There should be a drop-down menu with the different manuals there. You'll see 3 of them. We're in the self-control manual, and you can go ahead and download that for future use or just to look at tonight. And let's go ahead and we're going to go ahead and just go back here and let's get our mind wrapped around. It's been a few days. Let's get our mind wrapped around what we're trying to accomplish here on LP7D. LP7D. Remember, we've already gone over the cannibalistic cows and mad cow disease. And, I hate to say it that way because the cows aren't the ones doing this, That's mankind feeding cows things that they don't know what they're getting, basically. The cows are being tricked into eating animal proteins that they shouldn't eat. They're putting it in the feed and bone meal, as Catan showed us. Let's look at the midway through the step on step 7. It says, have students read pages 211 to 213 under the section entitled "The Saga Continues," and complete the quiz on page 214. Discuss the answers and emphasize to students that because many food contaminants slowly affect the body, serious consequences manifest themselves years later, so we must consider how our choices affect the food supply. And I thought it was extremely interesting what Catan showed, what the doctors are saying, what the scientists are saying on how long, these things sit in the body from the mad cow disease, from the Creutzfeldt-Jacobs disease, and the different forms of dementia that it brings. Did you hear how long it can be before you actually know you have it? I heard numbers 40 to 50 years. Okay, so we got to ask ourselves a question. All these cases of Alzheimer's and Parkinson's that have skyrocketed since 1995. I showed the article that it started skyrocketing in the mid-90s, which is 10 years after the human form of mad cow disease was found in Britain, which Catan showed in the film. Is that a coincidence? These cases of dementia cases have skyrocketed since the advent of feeding the animals this bone meal and protein put in their animal feed, etc. And it wasn't just that. Remember, they burned these animals. They burned over, I think, of somewhere close to 200,000 cows in Britain alone. And as Catan said, these ashes, they went into the atmosphere. They were planted in the fields where crops were planted. The ashes came down all over the place, and people that are eating leafy greens and things from the fields, these things spread in that way. So we can't think that it's limited to just one area. This earth is a big bubble. Remember, the environment, like it says here, we got to think about the consequences that these contaminants or these pollutants are bringing to our bodies and our minds. And the things that we're doing, we're not even stopping and thinking that, well, when we burn the animal, the ashes are going up and the prions and the the disease, the prions, you're not killing them. It has to be at least 850 degrees to kill those things. Okay, so it says, well, let's go ahead and go over to page 211, and we'll just continue. And I think before we do that, let's go to page 188, because I want to remind you about pollution, because you're going to hear that word. Pollution on page 188, we tend to think, when we think of pollution, of course, we think of people throwing trash on the ground or flicking their cigarette butts out the window or throwing their beer bottles on the side of the road. But, that's more than that, okay? It's pollution, it says, is the contamination of the environment with waste material. Waste material. Didn't I show a few classes ago about human waste material being sprayed on the soil, human excrement being put in the soil and in the schoolyards, and people were building brick huts there in Africa out of this material, so people are actually living in it. This is how terrible it actually is. People are drinking sewer water. So these are waste materials that are being put into the environment. I'm going to show you some other waste material tonight too that they're putting in the environment. It's pretty amazing. I used to know a counselor, a friend of mine. He was a chemical dependency counselor, they call him. For people that are hooked on drugs. And the more I learned in the Peaceful Solution, and I saw what man was doing with these chemicals, and how prevalent chemicals are in food production. Just in food production alone, I realized that this whole earth is chemical dependent. We're living in a chemical dependent society. It's not just using drugs. The chemicals are everywhere. And I'm going to show you just how prevalent it is tonight in our society. Oh, wow. That first slide, something occurred there. I don't see any writing on that first slide. Did I not darken the print? Oh, there it is. Okay. I won't be able to. I think I can possibly read that, but basically that first slide, I want you to understand that the use of animals and food for food, it's been done since the beginning of mankind. That's not the problem. The problem is that people are trying to do things with our food and with the animals that are not, for lack of a better term, natural. Okay? In other words, injecting, as Catan started getting into last time about, splicing genes from other species and putting them into, for instance, from an animal species and trying to plant them in the potatoes. Splicing mustard greens with mice genes, okay? To get a certain trait or a certain characteristic in that food. As an example, they could take the genes of a glowing jellyfish and put it in a potato so the potatoes will glow at night so the guys can pick them, Things like this. This is the things that they can do with gene splicing, okay? But, as we're learning, and as we should have known, when you take something and you mix it, this is where the pollution comes from. Remember that word pollute meant to, defile, to adulterate, remember, to mix one thing and something that shouldn't go into something else. Okay, this is what pollution actually is. We got to wrap our mind around pollution, what it actually means. So it's not the food and the animals that's the problem. It's the lack of morality that man is demonstrating. And again, it's because why? Why is man displaying this lack of morality? Because they're not being taught morality, and the motivating factor behind many of the things people do is the almighty dollar. You know, they're doing it for profits. You know, like Catan said about the animals. They want bigger, fatter cows on the market quicker. So, you know, we can feed them with all these hormones and we can feed them with all this animal protein to make them fatter. But the problem is the consequences that come from that kind of action. The same with the chickens. You know, I could show you videos regarding what they do with chickens and how chickens are brought up in chicken houses and how they can make a full-grown chicken in 45 days. They can also genetically alter the chicken to make it have more white meat. You know, they can do all these things, but with all these things that make them grow faster and make them, quote unquote, better than what's natural, you know, like they're better than butter or they're better than salt, right? Or they're better than whatever, right? Is there anything better than what's natural? You know, like the way it is, the way it was actually made? No. But this is what they do for money. And that's the main factor in everything that's being done. Okay, so let's go to that next slide because I want to show you some facts about this planet here. And I did a horrible job on this being able. Okay, but it says Earth and all life on it being saturated with man-made. This is an article, by the way, called "Scientists Categorize Earth as a Toxic Planet." That means poisoned planet. Earth and all life on it are being saturated with man-made chemicals in an event unlike anything in the planet's entire history, says Julian Cribb, author of Surviving the 21st Century. Every moment of our lives are exposed to thousands of these substances. They enter our bodies with each breath, meal, or drink we take. The clothes and cosmetics we wear, the things we encounter every day in our homes, workplaces, and travel. In other words, these chemicals, these toxic chemicals are everywhere in our world. You know, we come in contact with them constantly. And in the next slide, it gives you some examples of what they're saying about what we're coming in contact with. Manufactured chemicals, 30 million tons a year. 30 million tons. I want you to think about what a ton is. A ton is 2,000 pounds. So 30 million times 2,000 pounds, okay? Wrap your mind around that. Plastic pollutions in the ocean, 8 million tons per year. Hazardous waste, 4 million tons a year. Remember, these are all like an avalanche of toxic chemicals. We're living on a toxic planet. Coal, oil, gas, etc., 15 gigatons. That's billion tons. 15 billion tons a year. Lost soil, 75 gigatons. Metals and materials, 75 gigatons. Remember, a gigaton is a billion tons. And a billion tons is a billion times 2,000 pounds, okay, which has got to be in the trillions. Mining and mineral waste, 200 gigatons a year. And water, mostly contaminated with the things I just read you, 9 trillion tons a year. Okay, these are just some of the chemicals, some of the things we're coming in contact with. So we're living on a very polluted planet. Okay, but remember, all of this is done by man. This, you know, it's not the animals doing it. It's not the plants doing it. It's not the insects. It's not the microorganisms doing this. It's us, because we're not practicing the self-control. We're not stopping and thinking and weighing out our decisions before we do things. We're letting, what do they say, throwing caution to the wind, all for the sake of the almighty dollar, for the most part. Can you go to the next slide? In the same article, it says industrial toxins are now routinely found in newborn babies, in mother's milk, in the food chain, in domestic drinking water worldwide. They're routinely found. All these chemicals are found in all, so babies are being born polluted. You know, the mothers are feeding them breast milk that's polluted. Not just that, but the babies are born with the birth defects, with the different diseases that are brought, like the STDs, that, the baby didn't do anything wrong, but because of someone else's lack of self-control and lack of proper character education, they made choices that brought these things into the bodies of their baby, into the future generation. So remember what pollution is. Remember, it's very, 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 very important that you get your students to understand the concept of pollution, okay? And show them all these various things that you've been learning about how we can pollute our world. Okay, so let's go to page 211 now, and we'll continue where Catan left off. The saga continues, and I think he made it about through the first half of the page, but let me go ahead and start it at the top. It says, even if you're not particularly fond of vegetables, you still rely on the agricultural industry in more ways than you can imagine. Crops such as wheat, corn, and soy are used in many foods. And as you're going to learn tonight, corn and soy are like 50% of food products, and this is just an estimate they give. I think it's a lot more now, because when I found the article, it was a little bit, it was probably about 3 years old. They say over 50% of items in the supermarket that contain corn, most of them contain corn and soy, and a lot of it's genetically modified corn and soy. Okay? So, we're probably getting it in our diet without even really realizing it. Now it says, sadly, it says, so if you enjoy tacos and pizza, for instance, which I do, consider that even these foods are made up of ingredients that had to be grown. Remember, you had to grow the tomatoes, you had to grow the wheat to make the flour for the pizza dough. You had to grow the cow from the ground. Remember, the cows eat grass that grows from the ground. Without the grass that grows and the plants that grow from the ground, the cow can't eat. So even the cow's basically out of the ground. Okay, you don't grow them like you do plants, but they grow from the things that are coming up from the ground. And whatever that cow's eating, remember the old saying we learned, you are what you eat? Tacos are made from corn, and pizza dough is made from flour, which comes from wheat. And in addition, pizza sauce is made with tomatoes. The diet of the world's inhabitants is agriculturally based. Here in America, our staple is potatoes. But in Asia, Asian countries, the staple is rice. They eat a lot of rice, but it's agriculturally based, the diet of this world. Sadly, insects and weeds destroy a large percentage of crops yearly. Since our diet depends on agriculture, scientists have been determined to find ways to reduce the loss of crops. Chemical sprays and genetically modified crops are just two ways to combat insects. And, I think at this point, hey, if you could you go to slide 13? I want to show you, I want to give people an idea. It's the last slide, actually. Slide 13. This is what they grow food with. It's called fertilizer, but it's called ammonium nitrate, okay? Ammonium nitrate. You know what ammonium nitrate's from? What they used to use it in? Bombs. Is bomb making material. In World War I, they had a surplus of bombs. When the war was over, they didn't know what to do with all that ammonium nitrate and all those bombs, and they figured out, hey, we can grow food with these bombs. Did you know that? Yeah. You ever seen an ammonium nitrate factory blow up? We had one right here in Texas that leveled the whole town. It looked like a nuclear bomb went off. Can you show the third video, video 3? Let's remind everyone of a plant in West Texas, just not too far from here, just north of Waco, in 2013. You can go ahead and roll the clip.
And the Dallas Morning News reports on investigators calling a deadly explosion at a fertilizer plant an intentional criminal act. The massive blast 3 years ago killed 15 people and hurt about 300 others. It is one of the worst industrial disasters in Texas history. Manuel Bojorquez covered the explosion. He is back at the site where the plant once stood. Manuel, good morning.
Good morning. The blast struck with such force that it registered as a 2.1 earthquake and left behind a crater here that was 12 feet deep. It has since been filled, but you can still find pieces of debris like this mangled rebar, and there is a memorial cross, reminders of the tragedy that happened here. When the massive explosion ripped through this Texas fertilizer plant in 2013,
Dad,
you okay?
Dad, I can't hear.
Come here.
I can't hear.
It leveled part of the small town of West.
There has been an explosion on the fire scene. There are firefighters down at this time.
The blast destroyed hundreds of buildings, including schools, a nursing home, and an apartment complex. 15 people were killed, 12 of them first responders who had rushed to the scene.
We have never stopped investigating this fire.
Wednesday, after more than 3 years and a more than $2 million investigation, federal authorities revealed the fire that sparked the explosion was deliberately set in a seed room at the facility.
The fire has been ruled as incendiary. This means this fire was a criminal act.
During their investigation, authorities said they rebuilt part of the plant in their lab, conducted more than 400 interviews, and analyzed evidence found as far away as 2.5 miles from the blast site.
There's anger, there's confusion, there's frustration.
Just days after the blast, we first met Pastor John Crowder and his family, who lost their home. We spoke to Crowder again on Wednesday after he learned of the findings.
I really was surprised. I had settled in my mind that they were going to say it was some kind of electrical problem.
It's hard to think that somebody would intentionally set that fire.
Exactly.
Authorities did not name any suspects.
It just makes you mad.
But Phil Calvin, whose son Perry was killed, already has a message for whomever is responsible.
I want them to get the maximum penalty. I'd like to see them put so far back in prison that they don't ever see the light of day.
Federal authorities are offering a $50,000 reward for any information leading to an arrest. They say they believe their investigation is headed in the right direction, but they need the public's help to, quote, get them across the finish line. Nora?
Really interesting indeed, Manuel. Thank you so much.
So something that we grow our food with did that? That's quite disturbing. We grow food with that. You know, remember, that's the same substance that was used in the Oklahoma City bombing, ammonium nitrate in a Ryder truck. You know, so remember, this is bomb-making material that they're putting in the soil to grow food. Okay, so that's just one example of, you know, some of the things that we're putting in our soil and we're polluting our environment with. And imagine what that could be doing to our bodies, you know. Could it really be that safe? Okay, so it says, all right, it says chemical sprays include insecticides, some of which can kill insects by destroying their nervous system, and herbicides, which either poison the roots, leaves, or the entire plant. I'm trying to get my bearings back here. Okay, so it says, although both of these methods kill weeds and insects, many question the safety and wisdom of using products on food that have been known to have harmful effects on people, fish, and other wildlife. That's why I kind of wonder the wisdom behind using ammonium nitrate that's used to make bombs that kill people and destroy property, right? It says, in addition to this, these chemicals contaminate water by seeping into the ground or by runoff. And let's talk a little bit about genetic. I want to show you something. Let's go back to the slide on genetic engineering. I want to read you a little something here from Wikipedia about genetically modified organisms. Genetically modified organisms, some of the things that they genetically modify or manipulate, that they change, and can be food, mammals, fish, insects, plants, like rice, soybeans, potatoes, or corn, which is also called maize. These are some of the things that they genetically engineer. Okay, so they're genetically engineering our food supply because remember, corn and soybeans and potatoes actually are a huge staple in America. I mean, almost everything, when you read the ingredients, it's got some kind of soy or corn products in it. It talks about the process, some of the techniques, molecular cloning, recombinant. I don't know if I can. What's that? Recombinant DNA. Thank you. Genetic delivery, transformation. That doesn't sound great. Transformation, that's transforming something into something it's not. And then it talks about the different applications like genetically modified crops or foods or gene therapy, designer babies. Did you know that they make designer babies? Like they can take certain genes from certain things and put them in babies. I'm talking about human babies to bring about certain traits in the baby that parents want. That's something that they could do. Really the sky's the limit. I've seen them cloning things. I've seen them do, try to grow pig hearts or things to use in humans, for heart transplants, or, take a sheep's, characters, or how they can take sheep genes and try to put it into a mouse, or a mouse genes into a sheep, or they can take spider genes and put them into a goat to make, they were making bulletproof vests using the silk that a certain spider made, but they were putting the genes inside of a goat, the genes of that spider in the goat, so the goat's milk, they could harvest this stuff from the goat's milk. Okay, this is the kind of things they're doing, okay, with a food supply. I don't have anything on that. I should have brought a video on that so I could show you. Let's go to the next slide. So it asks, how do you get this? And that's some kind of, I can't remember what kind of fish that was. Flounder, Arctic flounder. Now, why would they want to put Arctic flounder genes into a tomato? Well, simple. Because they want a tomato that can withstand frost. Right? If you got an Arctic flounder that lives in very cold water, you can take the genes from that species. This is what they do. They take the genes from that fish and put it into the tomato, a totally different species. Okay? Do you think that's wise? No, because remember, you're adulterating or you're mixing something into something, and you're crossing something that shouldn't be put. It's one thing to breed fish. Fish are a species, right? Or dogs. Dogs are a species. So breeding one dog with another dog, nothing wrong with that. To get a certain traits in another dog, or a certain color, or get a dog to want to go fetch birds or whatever. People do this. They breed dogs. But you don't breed a dog with another species, some other kind of animal, or some other kind of, take the genes of a tomato and put it in a dog, or put dog genes in a tomato. You don't do that. If you do, you're going to have consequences, okay, in your environment. And they don't just go away. It spreads. These things spread. That's why they called it a toxic avalanche in that one article. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. It talks about the majority of genetically modified crops that are grown today are engineered to be resistant to pesticides and herbicides. These modified crops can withstand being sprayed with weed killer while still in the other plants in the field die. This concerns many people because the weeds can grow resistant to pesticides, leading farmers to spray even more on their crops. Remember, they got to keep spraying more and more and more. Let me ask you a question. Does it make sense to spray chemicals, poison on the food you're going to eat? Does that make any sense? Well, what they're also doing, You know, and I think Catan mentioned Monsanto, the company Monsanto. They're no longer called Monsanto. The Bayer took them over. The Bayer Corporation took them over, but they're still in operation, and they're still selling Roundup. You know, it's Monsanto that made the Roundup, but what they can do now is they just put the pesticide in the plant itself. They don't have to spray the plant with chemicals. They can just put the chemical or the pesticide within the genes of the plant so it grows inside the plant. Now, let me ask you a question. If the chemicals are on the outside of the plant, right? Well, you could probably wash some of them off, right? But if the chemicals on the inside of the plant, are you going to be able to wash it off? Or, you know, whatever it is they're putting in it to keep it, you know, Roundup ready or whatever they want to call it. Sounds pretty dangerous. This causes more environmental pollution, exposes the food to even more toxins, and causes more safety issues for the farmer himself, because the farmers are exposed to this in heavy doses. But the people that are consuming these products are being affected as well. Okay, animals, birds, even the birds and the bees, as we're going to see, are affected by these things. You know, I had the I don't know if you'd want to call it a privilege. It might have been more like a nightmare. I went to Monsanto one time. I have a picture of me in front of Monsanto. Can you roll that next slide? This was in St. Louis. We had gone to do a character education seminar in St. Louis, and we stopped by the Monsanto factory there. And as you can see, I was doing the Monsanto shuffle on the grass because I wasn't sure if their grass was genetically modified, so I was being very careful in my stepping there. But it did something to me, as you can see. All right, so we're going to go ahead and let me continue on the reading. I'm still here, though, thankfully. Hopefully nothing seeped through my shoes. By the way, Catan did the Monsanto shuffle, too. He was with me. Genetically altering or modifying crops is becoming more common, it says. Genes, the building blocks of life, determine what an organism will become and how it will function. Genes are located in the nucleus of every cell within an organism. So, remember, an organism is something that's living, okay? So, in every cell of everything that lives, there's genes, okay? And so they can take the genes from within that cell and they can try to insert them into the cell of other species of plants, animals, etc., to get whatever trait or characteristic that they're trying to get from that particular thing that they're taking it from. It says scientists have discovered a method called gene splicing that can combine the genes of different organisms in order to produce a desired outcome. Let's see. I'll make sure. Okay. I want to show you another slide, by the way. Let's look at the next slide. You know, one of the things that they're making now is called what they call Terminator seeds. You know, it used to be that farmers would grow a crop, and this is something that Monsanto came up with, by the way. The U.S. Supreme Court ruled that for years and years, they ruled that you cannot patent life. You cannot get a patent on anything that's alive. Because let's say that you go to file for a patent on corn, right? Well, guess what? All the corn on the earth would belong to you. And if anybody used corn, you would be able to sue them because you own the corn. You follow? I'm talking about, well, actually, probably just in the United States. But I think even these patents can extend even to other countries too. But I'm just saying that if you got a patent on corn in the United States, you would own the corn. And anybody that wanted to grow corn would have to come to you to grow that corn because you own it. You have the patent. But the Supreme Court always said you cannot patent life, anything that's alive. Well, they changed that. They changed that. And Some of this company, Monsanto, they started getting patents on corn and soybean, certain seeds. And so anybody that used that seed without Monsanto's permission could be sued. And many times Monsanto had hundreds of lawyers, because they're a multi-billion-dollar company. So they had hundreds of lawyers, that were always looking, to make money off lawsuits of people that were using their seeds. Problem was, like for instance, they would make these seeds called Terminator seeds, to where you could only use the seed one time. You could only plant your crop 1 year, and that was it. And you had to come back to Monsanto and buy more seeds. Okay? And if they found their seed, if Monsanto found their seed in somebody else's field, and they had people going around looking, if they found their seed in your field and you didn't buy that seed from Monsanto, they would sue you and take your whole farm. Okay? And who's going to be able to fight against a multi-billion-dollar corporation? This is the kind of stuff that's going on. Okay? But this is one of the products that they actually made, was these Terminator seeds, where you can only use them once. And this is completely decimated farming as we know it, because farmers used to save their seeds and they would replant them year after year. And now they would clean them and they would replant them, but they can't do that anymore. And, I don't even know how farmers make it anymore. I don't even know what drives them to want to. I guess there's something special. There really is something special about people that want to work on the land and agriculture. And, but I don't see how they're able to do it anymore with all these regulations and all the, these threats of, because think about it, how can Monsanto's seed that they have a patent on end up in your field? It's simple. A bird could pick it up and drop it in your field. An animal could do that. The wind could blow it into your field, right? There's many ways it could end up somewhere else, and then you end up getting sued and losing losing your farm and your livelihood. And this is what's taking place. You can go watch Food Inc. That's a great documentary on what takes place with the seeds, okay, and how they're controlling the seed, and they're trying to control the food, okay, because if you can control the food, they think you can control the people. Okay, so let's look at the next slide. It says, consider the following. The genetically modified products are having an effect on the rest of the environment. They are affecting beneficial bugs and insects and even the microlife. These genetically modified products, they're affecting bugs even, and they're affecting insects, as we're going to see, and even microlife. The microorganisms are affected by man mixing, adulterating, polluting other things in the environment. Okay? Remember, this has an effect on everyone. It's not just humans it has an effect on. Let me read this next, I guess before we look at that. I guess we can look at the next slide. Let's look at how it's affecting the insects. It says, another result that has recently become known is the disappearance of the honeybee. While producers claim they don't understand why the honeybees are disappearing, we can see the direct link to the increase of genetically engineered products, which causes genetically changed pollen to be produced, and the disappearance and death of the bees. Despite their name, honeybees do more than just make honey. They pollinate more than $15 billion worth of U.S. crops every year, contributing to 1 in every 3 bites of food you eat, including apples and almonds, melons and strawberries, carrots, cucumbers, broccoli, and soybeans. Commercial migratory beekeepers deliver tens of thousands of the insects to groves and farms across the country every spring. The bees do their work, and the crops grow strong. So without the bees, guess what would take place? No food. Okay? And so if the bees are being affected by the genetically engineered or genetically modified crops, right? There's a problem. Not only that, remember, they're pollinating the fields. And they're taking pollen from one field, and the bees travel, right, into other fields, and it spreads. You see how it spreads? And it spreads to other colonies. And we have what they call colony collapse disorder with the bees, where they find whole colonies of bees just dead, like you saw in that picture. Okay? They're not just dying of natural causes. Okay? They're dying of causes that we've caused by our decision making. Okay? By our decision to genetically modify, to adulterate, to pollute, to mix things with things that we shouldn't mix them in. We're destroying the environment when we do that, as I showed in that definition of pollution. And let's look at the next slide, kind of give you an idea. It says insects, birds, and wind sorry, I can't read that. What's that next word? Oh, carry. Okay. Insects, birds, and wind can carry genetically altered pollen to other fields and forests, polluting plants and creating new species that will carry on the genetic modification. Okay, so notice the birds can carry it, the bees can carry it, these pollen into other fields, and end up spreading this contamination, because that's what it is. It's contamination. It's pollution. Okay, so not only is it harming that beautiful hummingbird you just saw, but it's destroying those beautiful bees and other insects that are there to keep. They're doing a job for us. I think Catan showed you where he talked about it in the last class. These creatures are doing a job for us. You know, they're doing things for us whether we realize it or not. A lot of times, I never paid much attention to birds because they're up in the air, you know, so I'm not really looking up a lot. So I don't really notice what they're doing. But I've kind of made it in the last few years. I've actually made it my ambition to sit there and watch them, because very interesting things they do. Okay. And, you know, and I've learned to respect them a lot more because of what they're doing for us. They're actually doing a lot of things for us that we don't realize. Okay. Eating the insects, pollinating, etc. You know, we don't think about all the things they do to keep us alive, you know, and keep us healthy, you know, but they're working for us, and we don't even realize we're actually hurting the things that are working for us, and we're destroying, you know, the eco balance of our world, because a lot of these creatures are dying off too. You know, there's a lot of these creatures that have gone extinct because of man's manipulation of things. Okay, so let's see what we got next here. Okay, I already did that. So let me go back to the reading on page 211. It says, it has been reported that approximately 50% of all soy and 38% of all corn grown in the U.S. are genetically altered. Soy crops have been genetically altered to make them resistant to herbicides. And by the way, if you don't think corn's in almost everything, have you ever heard of, what's that stuff they put in, high fructose corn syrup? Just look on a can. Almost your sodas and things like that, unless you buy cane sugar soda from certain stores, most of them have high fructose corn syrup in it. And it's genetically modified for the most part. Okay, so, but you know, it's kind of funny. It's really strange because when I used to go to Mexico, I've been there a couple times, they didn't have that ingredient in their soda. They use sugar, just cane sugar, you know. It seems that America, you know, comes up with some, and I'm not saying America's the only one that's done this, because as Catan showed, and we showed about the mad cow, you know, that started over in Britain, you know, with the practices they were feeding the cows over there. But that's not to say they weren't doing it here, okay, because these ideas, they travel, you know, and if it was in one person's head, it was probably in somebody else's. So, but, you know, high fructose corn syrup is an ingredient that's in almost everything. So think about it, you know. It says soy crops have been genetically altered to make them resistant to herbicides. In this way, when farmers spray to kill the weeds, the young soy plants would not be affected. Scientists are now altering specific genes in corn to contain a pesticide called Bacillus thuringiensis. Okay, I probably didn't pronounce that right, but they believe that insects will automatically avoid a plant that has its own internal pesticide. Internal pesticide. That means the pesticide is growing inside of the plant. Does that sound healthy? Doesn't sound healthy to me. The goal is to reduce the amount of humans on the planet. That's what it should say. The goal is to reduce the amounts of additional pesticide used on the plants. That's what it says in the book. It says 70% of processed foods in American grocery stores have already been genetically modified. Now, this book was written in 2003. This has been going on a long time, right? How much food in the grocery store do you think is genetically modified at this point? A huge percent more than what you're seeing here. At this time, it was 70% of processed foods. It says, however, many European countries refuse to allow genetically altered foods into their lands or on their tables. They fear that the food will be harmful in the long run. This uncertainty has many people worried about the future of our food supply. And you know, man comes up with all kinds of brilliant ideas to try to fix the problems they create. But with each problem they create, their solution creates more problems. Okay? And that's a fact. I'm going to show you, I actually wanted to show you this when I was showing you about the cows, but this might be a great time to show the video regarding a clip from Food Inc. regarding, you know, they were having a problem with E. coli infecting beef. So they came up with an idea to try to keep the incidence of E. coli limited, right? And as I said, each solution they come up with to try to solve a problem always creates more, as you'll hear in their own words. I want to show you how they use what they're putting in the beef supply. The beef to try to keep you safe, air quotes. Let's go ahead and show the food. So in order, remember that the man said, he says, we think we can lessen E. coli. Did you see that contraption? Did you see the size of that thing? It's actually, they're controlling these factories in many states from that one place. What they're doing is, I don't know if you saw on the conveyor belts, they've taken all the products from a cow that you can't eat, that you shouldn't eat. They're chopping it up, they're grinding it up, and then they're making meat filler. They're putting it in ammonia, they're washing it in ammonia, and they're making meat filler. Meat filler. You ever had 100% beef hamburger at McDonald's or Burger King? Well, they're right, it's 100% beef, but they don't tell you what's in it. See, the advertising is very interesting, you know, how they can advertise, because it's true, it's 100% beef, but they don't tell you what's in the beef. Let me show you what they're making so you can get a better idea of what you just saw. What you just saw was the contraption they're making this stuff with. Let me show you the finished product so you can see what they're putting in your burgers if you like to eat at a fast food restaurant. Let's go ahead and play the next clip. No sound.
Hamburger meat and it's chicken nuggets, right? And a few years ago, we did that story about how McDonald's uses this pink slime to make its hamburger meat and its chicken nuggets, right? And basically what it is, is basically meat that has been ground up very finely. And then they use something known as ammonium hydroxide in order to kill all the bacteria in the meat. Now, this is not like great cuts of meat, right? It's basically like the odds and ends of the animal that are left over. And like I said,
Really?
yeah, obviously. And then they have to use this ammonium hydroxide because of the fact that it has a ton of bacteria in it. And they use this nasty slush to make all of their products, right? So there's this chef by the name of Jamie Oliver who decided to really give McDonald's a hard time about this. And as a result, McDonald's USA has just announced that they will stop using ammonium hydroxide in their beef.
Wow, you got to give Jamie Oliver a lot of credit. At first, I was thinking that maybe he was doing it to get some attention, and like, is that kind of a cheesy PR move and stuff? But look, you got the job done. On the other hand, now your meat will have bacteria in it.
No, well,
No, I hope they found another way.
I hope they found another way as well. Who knows what that way is? But what I found really fascinating about this story, and everyone already knows this, right? You go to Canada or you go to a different country and they have standards there. They have regulations put in place so fast food companies can't use a cleaning product in order to sanitize the beef. Right? So what's amazing to me is that a spokesperson from McDonald's in Canada released a statement saying, oh, we've never used this disgusting product in our meat. Like, we've always only used 100% beef, salt, pepper, and that's it. You know, and I remember having a burger when I was in Europe once and thinking, and it was a McDonald's burger, and thinking, wow, this tastes really good. McDonald's is awesome. And it turns out that, yeah, it's not the same thing. It's so different. In the U.S., we have no standards. We'll eat anything.
Well, when I was in Taiwan, all the restaurants had signs on them saying, don't worry, no U.S. beef allowed. Okay? Because our reputation abroad is those guys do anything for a buck. So God knows what's in their beef. The goo that they use, it's pink. And the reason it's pink is because they shave some of it off of the bones and the blood mixes in.
Yeah.
That's why they got to use that bacteria-killing chemicals to get all the blood, etc., out of the goo. That's why you have 99-cent value menus, because if you're going to produce it for that cheap, you got to find a way to do it. So it's not like they can't do it with the bacteria-killing things. It just will cost you a little more, right?
Right.
Wow, let's go to $1.09. I think it's going to be okay.
So, feel like getting a Happy Meal tonight? Yeah. No joke. This is what they're putting in the food. You know, and like I said, they can call it 100% beef because it is 100% beef. They just don't tell you it's about 50% some pink slime mixed in with it. You know, education's important so you can make more informed choices, right? The more you know, the better choices you can make in your diet. Because, you know, a lot of parents feed this to their children and they don't realize these things are very addicting, by the way. I used to eat at McDonald's and Burger King. I used to like that food too until, you know, I saw and I learned what I'm learning now, or what I learned in the Peaceful Solution years ago. I made the decision myself personally that, you know, I want to make my own hamburgers. Okay. I'm not interested in eating those kind of things. So back in the reading here, it says, sorry, in the middle of the page, it says, think about it. What if the pollen from a genetically altered plant is carried by the wind hundreds of miles into the field of an organic crop? Organic meaning all natural, okay? No fertilizers, no anything, just, you know, natural crop. It is possible that the genetically altered pollen could mingle with the organic crop, altering its structure and creating a new plant that might not bear fruit. So, see, it can even destroy other plants that aren't, you know, genetically modified in any way. Another concern is that genetically modified plants might crossbreed with wild species to produce superweeds, which cannot be eliminated using standard herbicides. Some people are also concerned that genetically modified foods can cause allergies. And I do believe, you know, when you see, I mean, I have a lot of friends that have allergies. Personally, I don't suffer from any allergies except I think I'm allergic to walnuts and pecans. And I wonder about that. I'm wondering why, because I don't think anybody should be allergic to anything. But think it's what they're putting in things that are causing these allergies that people have. It's all these toxic things in our environment that are in our foods. I remember I showed you the billions and billions of tons of pollution that's everywhere in our cosmetics, in our clothing, in our food supply, in the air, in the water. You know, I believe these are what's causing these allergies. Okay, it's not, you know, I don't think they're inherent in people. None of these dis-eases are inherent. Remember, we learned dis-ease is lack. Dis means no, and ease means peace. So if we're not practicing the moral principles in the peaceful solution, and we're cutting corners, and we're not considering, stopping and considering, you know, that is this right that I should be mixing this species and crossing it with this other species? Are we stopping and thinking about, you know, did they stop and think about, remember the question that was asked about the cattle ranchers? Did they stop and think about the consequences of feeding diseased animals to healthy ones and forcing herbivores to become carnivores? Did somebody stop and think that this might cause a problem? They might have. And they might have made the decision to go ahead with it. Because remember, money is a driving force. Got to get a bigger chicken, got to get a bigger cow, got to get those crops grown faster so we can get them on the market. And, you know, a lot of times they're well-intentioned, you know, like they say that, you know, it's sustainable. They always use that word sustainable. You know, we got to grow more food to keep up with the 8 billion people we got on our planet, you know. But, folks, we don't have to do any of this, as we'll, and I'm sure David will probably cover a little bit about. He will show us there's more natural ways to combat the insects and the things that, you know, come in and try to destroy our crops. They've been doing it for thousands of years before we started destroying everything, right? So there's a way to do it. We just need to get educated and find out the right way to do things. And then as peaceful solutions students, we could make a difference, you know, in our environment, the crops that we have, our gardens and our crops and our animals, the way what we feed them, we can make a difference in our environment and start, you know, spreading this to other people through educating them and getting this information out. So I think the next class is going to be on 11/23/2022 on Wednesday at 5:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. I appreciate everybody's attendance this evening, and I hope you all have a great evening and stay warm.